Hey folks, although it premiered for the first time back in December, Legion Timewalking is coming back once again on April 12th, and this time the rewards are going to be scaled up for patch 9.2. Since this gear can't drop from your vaults and therefore has a maximum item level of 272 after Valor upgrades, many people might think that it's completely irrelevant and not worth farming. However, for many items this is not the case. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the 5 best items that drop from Legion Timewalking, including what they do and where you'll be able to get them. The first item we'll be discussing is a healer trinket that drops from Blackrock Hold called Amalgam's 7th Spine. This trinket provides a flat amount of intellect and then has an effect which reads, your direct healing spells apply and refresh Fragile Echo for 6 seconds. When Fragile Echo expires, it restores mana to you. On screen now, you can see the exact spells which actually trigger this effect for every healer spec, but this trinket will primarily be useful for Restoration Druids and possibly Holy Priests. As you might imagine, an effect like this is fairly niche, as it requires you to actually need a trinket that restores mana, and then it'll only really be useful if you plan to naturally incorporate these spells into your rotation. For many healers, this simply isn't the case, but after doing some research and talking to my Resto Druid friend, it does seem like this trinket will be especially powerful for them. I've also read about some Holy Priests experimenting with this trinket, though it doesn't appear to be nearly as popular for them as it is for our Druids. The only problem with this trinket is that it's arguably the only good piece of loot to come out of Blackrock Hold, so as a healer, you probably will need to rely heavily on your tank and DPS friends to help you farm it. Now we'll be moving over to Court of Stars to discuss the next item, Jeweled Signet of Melandris, which is a ring that I would imagine most people expected to see on this list. In case you didn't play during Legion, this ring was incredibly well known as being, honestly, overpowered, because the old version of it would grant you a flat 10% increase to your auto attack damage. The reason it's only reached the 4th spot on this list though is because unfortunately, Blizzard decided to nerf it with the release of Legion Timewalking. Now, instead of increasing your auto attack damage by a percentage, it only buffs it by a flat amount, which is much less powerful. With that being said, this ring is still very strong for a number of specs, as it provides a completely free bonus in addition to the regular crit and haste. Based on the research that I've done, it appears that Jeweled Signet of Melandris is exceptionally powerful for rogues, relatively strong for Fury Warriors and Feral Druids, and then marginally better than an equal item level ring for most other specializations. I'd personally recommend just checking with your specs Discord to see what their opinion is on this ring before you spend a ton of time farming it. The free effect can be tempting, but do remember that some specs might simply prefer a ring with better itemization. Next up on the list, we have another healer trinket, which is called Flask of the Solemn Night. Just like the aforementioned ring, this trinket drops from Court of Stars, meaning that it should be much easier to farm, as this dungeon will be in high demand for most players. This trinket once again provides a flat amount of intellect, and the effect reads as follows. On equip, your healing spells have a chance to grant you 20 stacks of Solemnity for 10 seconds, increasing your haste by an amount per stack. Solemnity loses a stack every 1 second. Unlike the trinket we discussed earlier, this one is fairly useful for all healers, rather than being only desired by 1 or 2. It's hard to even say which healer this trinket would be the strongest for, as most discussions I read seem to imply that it's equally useful for all of them. However, I did want to give a quick disclaimer specifically for Venthyr Mistweavers. According to one of my friends, there's a bug with the Fallen Order ability for Mistweaver monks, which causes it to stop working properly if your haste goes above 33%. As a result, this trinket may look really good on tools like QE Live, but in practice it might actually be ruining your healing. Obviously, any healer simulation should be taken with a grain of salt, so if you do get this trinket, I'd recommend consulting with other players of your spec to figure out if it's actually worth taking. For the second to last spot, we have Moonlit Prism, which drops from Vault of the Wardens. This trinket provides a flat amount of haste, and then it has an on-use effect with a 1 minute 30 second cooldown that reads as follows. Increases your agility or intellect by an amount for 20 seconds. Your ranged attacks and spells cause this effect to stack up to 20 times. What's interesting about this trinket is that despite specifying that it only is affected by ranged attacks and spells, it can still be used effectively by some melee DPS like Enhancement Shamans or Survival Hunters. It may not be ideal for them, but both specs have multiple abilities in their rotation which do count as ranged attacks, so it is a functional trinket for a large number of players. However, there are 2 specializations for which this trinket is arguably best in slot, that being Arcane Mage and Beast Mastery Hunter. For BM hunters, the only other item which manages to beat this trinket is a mythic version of the first sigil, which is going to be really difficult to obtain at the moment. For arcane mages though, this trinket is far and away your best in slot, especially for single target, so it's absolutely worth farming. Before I discuss the final and, in my opinion, best overall item from Legion Timewalking, I want to give a quick honorable mention to all of the solid tanking trinkets. When it comes to tank trinkets, it's hard to give an accurate rating, as their viability can depend wildly based on your class and what level of content you're actually running. There are many solid options present in Legion Timewalking, so I'm just going to list off a few along with the dungeon that they drop from. Writhing Heart of Darkness drops from Darkheart Thicket, Giant Ornamental Pearl drops from Eye of Ashara, Neltharian's Lair has 2 trinkets, Shard of Rockmora, and Talisman of the Cragshaper. Although I don't think any of these trinkets outperform the current best options, such as Blood Splattered Scale or Shard of Anhild's Aegis, they are solid options which you could probably get away with using if you don't have access to one of the standard trinkets. With that out of the way, it's time to talk about our final, and in my opinion, most important item that can drop in Legion Timewalking, and that is the Faulty Countermeasure from Vault of the Wardens. This trinket is pretty straightforward. It provides you with a flat amount of crit, and then it has an on-use effect with a 2-minute cooldown which reads, sheathe your weapons in ice for 30 seconds, giving your melee attacks a chance to cause an amount of additional frost damage, and slow the target's movement by 20% for 8 seconds. This slow is nice, I guess, but the primary use for this trinket is the effect that it applies to your melee attacks, as this can deal a lot of damage for many specializations. For starters, this is arguably the best DPS trinket for Vengeance Demon Hunters, Brewmaster Monks, and Protection Warriors, since those 3 tanks get a lot of value out of effects that proc additional damage. This trinket is also fairly powerful for a lot of damage specializations, primarily Fury Warriors and Outlaw Rogues. It's worth noting that Faulty Countermeasure is mostly used in single target scenarios, and that's not to say it's not powerful on AoE, there's just other trinkets which tend to handle those scenarios much better. That being said, I'd argue that for Mythic Plus and many raid encounters, this trinket is extremely powerful, if not best in slot, for a large amount of melee DPS and tanks. And with that said, we've covered the 5 best items which you can get from Legion Timewalking. Although I covered many good items in this video, it's entirely possible that I've missed something which you're personally really excited for. I'm really curious to hear which items you're planning to farm, so feel free to leave a comment and let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could throw it a like, as that will help other people find it too. That's it for me though, so I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.